Hey guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel. Before I get on to the video, I like to introduce myself a little bit, for those of you who don't know me. I'm Coco. Hi. I am a 16-year-old. I am a Japanese and I immigrated to Singapore at the age of 4 and I've been living in Singapore ever since. And that's kind of inherently why I'm making this video, in which I will be reflecting on my 10 years under Singapore education. We love patriotism. I'm wearing like red and white right now. Singapore's national colors. Anyways, a little bit of a context why I ended up having 10 years under Singapore education. So yes, why Singapore? First of all, well, because in 2011, there was the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, and my parents were concerned about safety. And they've always wanted me to learn English, so they decided maybe this is a sign to move elsewhere. They considered the US, but then, safety and like racism, so then they decided Singapore, where I could learn English and Chinese, as a matter of fact. So yes, before I get into the details, let me just set a basis. What do I mean by Singapore education, right? So in Singapore, like any other country, or even more so because of the diverse community of people here, to cater to all these different communities, there are different types of schools. As a Japanese and permanent resident in Singapore, I had 3 options, or my family had 3 options in mind. Singapore's local schools run by Singapore's Ministry of Education, or MOE for short, international schools, or Japanese school. Well, the last option wasn't really... I came here to learn English, so why put me in a Japanese school? My first year in Singapore, which was 2012, my parents got me enrolled into an international school, international kindergarten. But then there was a lot of Japanese kids there and I wasn't really learning English. So then in my second year in Singapore, in other words, my last year in kindergarten, they put me into local kindergarten where there were like no Japanese kids. I think there was one, but yeah, no Japanese. That was when I was really exposed to like English and Chinese, and maybe because of the overload of like knowledge, apparently I was sleepwalking. The next year I started primary school, or in other words, elementary school. I don't know what other countries call it. I entered a local primary school run by Singapore's MOE. When my parents made this decision, there were other Japanese parents who like commented, that's a really sucky decision for your kid, man. Firstly, because of the rumors of the rigorous school curriculum. As a person who went through that curriculum, I would say it is stressful. In your graduating year of your primary school, you gotta take what is called the PSLE, which is set to like decide your fate, because your next school is dependent on your PSLE score. The second factor that Japanese parents didn't want to put their kids into Singapore's local schools was that impression that they had that Singaporeans don't speak good English. He speaks English lah, The last factor, their worry for discrimination. Looking back at history, the Japanese occupied Singapore during World War II. I'm going to talk about this in greater detail later on. But in Singapore's local schools, of course, you learn about that history. And anyways, I'll talk about that in greater detail later. But yes, even though there were like these type of comments coming from all sides, my parents still eventually put me into local primary school because cheaper school fees, like the international schools, they are like super X. So yes, I completed my 6 years in primary school, took PSLE, achieved a decent PSLE score, and then I proceeded to secondary school, or I don't know, middle school? Is that what you call it? For my secondary school, it was my first option. I fortunately got accepted into School of the Arts Singapore, SOTA. So SOTA, it is a local school because technically it is under MOE, but it is also partially under the Ministry of Information, Communication and the arts. Also, SOTA is an IB school, so it is a little bit different from a typical secondary school, which is called like mainstream schools, which usually provides O-level or A-level programs or IP programs. SOTA provides a 6-year course, so basically secondary school and high school is like combined, unlike most schools which usually only provide 4 years, so only secondary school and then you take O-levels to proceed to polytechnic or junior college. I know it is complicated, but do your own research if you want to find out more. Okay, so I entered SOTA and I really enjoyed my school life there. I mean, after all, it was my first option, right? But then I decided in my 4th year at SOTA, no, I will not complete my 6-year education at SOTA and I will quit Singapore education starting coming July. I'm transferring to an overseas school, which I may disclose the name of in the near future, but not in this video. Unless I choose to go to university in Singapore, this will mark my last time under Singapore education. Yup. It's quite sad. Yeah. So I thought I'd like to commemorate this significant occasion by reflecting on my past 10 years under Singapore education and share some of my takeaways, all the good and the bad stuff with you guys if you're curious about Singapore education. First of all, I would like to talk about the good stuff. Why being schooled in Singapore's local schools was good for me personally. Different schools suit different people. I really feel like Singapore's local schools suited me. I believe so because my family is very chill. It's not a stereotypical Asian family where parents are helicopter parents, control the child's life and care about their academics. Because my dad pretty much grew up in the States and my mom went to high school and university in the US, and my mom pursued arts, which is not, I guess, the right thing to do for most people because pursuing arts, it's not a stable job. She's not pursuing arts now after she graduated, but the fact that she chose to pursue arts when she was a student really shows how chill my family is. They really prioritized my interests and the experiences that I got more than my grades. I guess that really helped maintain a balance in my life. In contrast to my chill home life, the academically rigorous school curriculum in Singapore's local schools really balanced that out, and it was just right for me. Going to Singapore's local schools was really the key factor that honed my discipline. I have pretty good time management skills and I take initiative for my work. You know how most parents would say study harder? My parents tell me stop studying. I guess that good work ethic wouldn't have been possible if I didn't go to Singapore's local school. I would say I have a pretty good academic foundation because my foundational school years were good, strict, tight, and academically rigorous. And despite how everyone criticizes the rigor of Singapore educational curriculum, Singapore schools do focus on stretching students' extracurricular skills apart from academics. This could be in the form of CCAs. In my primary school, I did rhythmic gymnastics and netball. In terms of netball, it really taught me life skills regarding teamwork. In contrast to how Japan's school strives to treat all students equally, Singapore schools gives opportunities to students very selectively. For example, I was offered free singing enrichment classes by my teachers upon them recognizing my passion for singing after a school talent show. Not everyone received this offer. Contrary to that, I never received an offer to participate in mathematics Olympiad like my sister did. One may say that this is unfair for the kids, comparing kids is unethical, but I personally really think that that kind of intentional approach, that selective approach is really good because students can recognize their talents. They can feel like they're just better at that aspect compared to other people, and that also boosts their confidence. I don't know, I personally think that is a great thing. In this way, Singapore's local schools, I would say, maintains a pretty good balance between academics and activities, unlike how many people say that Singapore's school curriculum is very, very academically focused. Another reason why I feel like going to Singapore's local schools was really good for me, going to Singapore's local schools really allowed me to see real diversity. But in the midst of this, see what it means to be Singaporean and in turn discover my identity. This is the thing that I really want to talk about because I think this is really deep stuff. Y'all probably know that Singapore is a very multiracial, multicultural society. People come from everywhere. This seems more prevalent in Singapore's international schools than its local schools, since international schools are really occupied by foreigners as compared to Singapore's local schools, which is occupied mostly by Singaporeans of Chinese, Indian, and Malay descent. But I would argue that real diversity exists in Singapore's local schools rather than Singapore's international schools. This is especially so in primary school. It's compared to like Singapore's international schools where basically all the rich kids go. Not only having some extent of diversity in race, nationality, and culture, in Singapore's local schools there is also diversity in social status. I had friends from low-income families, friends from orphanages, although it was never really revealed who it was. One incident I really want to talk about that is a good example of this. You know how I mentioned that I had netball as my CCA in my primary school? So basically my team wanted to purchase the same water bottle together. So we agreed that we would all each pay for our own water bottles. But then this one girl couldn't pay for it. She couldn't afford it, and we agreed to pitch in to afford hers. But then later on, our school's teacher scolded us really harshly for doing that. Our school's teacher told us that we should have informed them firsthand and not have handled this matter in our own hands, because it's an issue concerning money, which can be a sensitive topic to some people who can't afford it. I think that was the first encounter with differences in financial status. I think that really left a very big impact on me till this day. SOTA, School of the Arts, I would say students come from relatively richer families, so there will be quite a lot of instances where there will be like money collection within the class. I know that everyone most probably can pitch in, but then I always remind the class committee, some students might not want to pitch in the money, and this kind of money collection should be done more sensitively. I'm definitely more conscious about this topic as compared to other students. I think in that way, props to Singapore's local schools. And I also had opportunities to visit schools in less developed countries. All in all, I really got to realize and see for myself real diversity. And I believe that is what being a Singaporean really means. Normalizing the fact that everyone is different, accepting people for who they are and accommodating to their needs, seeing people for their individual selves. And I think this is really reflected in how the Japanese occupation of Singapore during World War II was taught to me. As a Japanese, this topic is never completely easy for me to discuss, but I'm grateful and fortunate to have learned about this topic in Singapore's local schools. One would probably think that paying close attention to me or constantly checking in and I am doing okay while teaching this topic would be the best way for a teacher to handle the situation. But my teachers did otherwise. My teachers taught this topic to me like they would to any other student. I questioned that a little bit at first, but then I think that is their way of expressing empathy for me, not really stepping in. I mean, of course, the first class they would be like, I would be covering the topic of Japanese occupation of Singapore. If you don't feel okay or anything, you can just exit the classroom whenever you want. But then after that, they would never intrude into my boundaries and excessively ask if I am doing okay. And I think that really is the best way of handling the situation. And the very content of how the Japanese occupation of Singapore is taught in Singapore's classrooms is that never forget what happened, but forgive Japan. Like, Singapore has that kind of stance towards that side of history. In Singapore, I am I am seen as Coco. I'm seen as myself, and I'm not seen as a descendant of the people who had murdered Singaporeans' ancestors. And this, I can only... I don't even know, man. I just know that I absolutely cannot take for granted this forgiveness, this acceptance that I receive in Singapore. That's why I've been able to feel really safe in Singapore's local schools and just study together with everyone else. So in this way and in many other ways, going to Singapore's local schools allowed me to experience life in a very Singaporean environment, learning about Singapore's history, learning about Singapore culture. And that's why, although I am Japanese on paper, I'm virtually a Singaporean now. I might know more about Singapore than I do about Japan, which is quite sad, I would admit. But I think it makes me unique and different, which is appreciated in Singapore. And you know, rather than knowing neither Japan nor Singapore, I think this is much better. At least I have a place that I feel like I belong to. I feel like I can return to. A place I identify with. Now that we've talked a lot about the good stuff, I'm gonna be talking about the bad stuff. Although I wouldn't really call it bad. I just like to see it as, why on earth am I leaving Singapore's local schools for another school? So yes, now that I think back, I think I joined SOTA instead of the other mainstream schools for the same reason why I now feel like I want to leave. Am I making sense? I'm aware that the traditional type of schooling in my primary school is a key reason for my strong academic foundation. And I think the Singapore school curriculum for that. But I think I've always found this traditional type of schooling where A is A and B is B really just not meaningful. I mean, it is meaningful and necessary to a certain extent, but really, how far? Although my PSLE scores were high enough to apply for some of the top schools in Singapore, I chose SOTA, where learning is done through the arts. I really enjoyed learning at SOTA, where intellectual discussions were regularly incorporated into classes, and application of knowledge was done routinely, rather than just spurting out knowledge one after another. However, SOTA, although being an art school, is still a Singapore local school. It is stressful, to put it in short. School hours are like extremely long, man. There are like projects and assessments one after another. It just started becoming very daunting for me. And at one point I realized that I was just completely completing work for the sake of completing it. I was choosing research questions that could score instead of those that really piqued my interest. That's when I thought, if I stay at SOTA, I mean, I would most probably score high in my IB years, accepted into like a good university and have a stable job afterwards. But I may end up never really having the opportunity to find out more about myself and what the heck I truly want to do in my life. That was when it occurred to me that I need to step into like a new chapter of my life. I had a school in mind, so I applied, and to my surprise, I got accepted. If I didn't, I would have stayed at SOTA. Like, Singapore's local schools are great. If I had to choose a school in Singapore, I would choose Singapore's local schools, out of which I would choose SOTA. But then upon my acceptance into this overseas school, I realized that this concludes my 10 years under Singapore education. And that's crazy, man. Like, I spent most of my childhood here. So yeah, I mean, you heard all the good stuff about Singapore's local schools. And there's so much more that I probably forgot to cover. But yeah, I'm just so immensely thankful for all the memories and experiences that my 10 years under Singapore's education offered me. I know that this really sounds very cliche, but I literally wouldn't be the person I am today without these 10 years. I gotta admit, I do feel a little insecure about my decision to transfer school. Because my friends from primary school and SOTA, basically my friends from Singapore's local schools, they're all so freaking talented, man. They're so caring, they're so thoughtful, and they're just so hardworking as well. I can't even imagine the impact they would make in this world, and I can't help but compare myself to them. So that's why I still do feel like maybe staying in Singapore is the right decision. But anyways, I made the decision already. I can't change it. I'll definitely miss Singapore so much, even though I'll come back like every 2 months. So yes, I guess that concludes my reflection of my 10 years under Singapore's education. It still hasn't hit me yet. But yes, wish me luck in this new school. I hope that through this video you got to learn more about Singapore's local schools. Remember, Singapore's local schools. I'm not talking about Singapore's international schools. If you found this video helpful in any way, please subscribe and like. It honestly took me like at least 3 hours to create this bunch of scripts. So yes, don't let all my efforts go into vain. Subscribe and like and comment and watch my other videos. Okay, bye guys. We, the citizens of Singapore, pledge ourselves as one united people, regardless of race, language, or religion, to build a democratic society based on justice and equality, so as to achieve happiness, prosperity, and progress for our nation.